You probably know someone who just got married. Maybe you went to the wedding. There was a venue, a dress, a ring, vows, a first dance, and a cake. It felt timeless. It felt like something humans have always done. But almost none of what you just pictured is ancient. Almost none of it is even close to what marriage originally was. And when you find out what it actually looked like, you will never see a wedding the same way again. Marriage is one of the oldest human institutions on the planet. Anthropologists have found evidence of formalized pair bonding rituals in nearly every civilization ever studied. But here's the part no one tells you: the reasons people got married, the way it was arranged, who had the power, who had the choice, and what it meant to the people involved. All of it was almost the opposite of what you think today. Start with the most basic assumption: that marriage is about love, that two people meet, feel something, and decide to build a life together. That is the story your entire culture has told you since childhood. It is in every song, every film, every greeting card. But for the vast majority of human history, that story did not exist. Not because ancient people were unfeeling, but because marriage was never designed for the people inside it. Anthropologist Helen Fisher, who has spent decades studying love and pair bonding across cultures, argues that romantic love as a primary reason for marriage is an extraordinarily recent invention. For most of human history, marriage was an economic and political contract between families, not between individuals. The two people getting married were often the last people consulted. Go back far enough, 10,000, 12,000 years, and you're in the early days of agricultural civilization. People have recently stopped being nomadic. They are settling. They are farming. They are accumulating things for the first time: land, livestock, grain stores. And the moment humans started accumulating things, they needed a system to decide who those things belonged to when someone died. Marriage was that system. Historian Stephanie Kuntz, author of one of the most thorough examinations of marriage across history, puts it plainly. Marriage was the primary way humans organized labor, managed property, created political alliances, and established legal rights over children. It had almost nothing to do with personal happiness. Happiness, if it came, was considered a bonus, a lucky accident, not a goal. In ancient Mesopotamia, one of the earliest civilizations to leave written records, marriage was a legal contract drafted by the families involved. The groom's family paid a bride price to the bride's family. This was not symbolic. It was a real transfer of wealth, livestock, silver, grain, that compensated the bride's family for the loss of her labor and future children. The bride herself had no legal standing in the transaction. She was not a party to the contract. She was the subject of it. Think about what that means. The most intimate decision of a person's life, who they would share a bed with, who they would build a family with, who they would spend every day beside, was made by other people, for reasons that had nothing to do with her. And this was not an exception. This was the rule. Across ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt, China, Greece, Rome, and most of the ancient world, the pattern was nearly identical. In ancient China, marriages were arranged by a professional matchmaker known as a Mei Ren, who evaluated not the compatibility of two people, but the compatibility of two families. Astrology, ancestry, social rank, and financial standing were all factors. The couple often met for the first time on the wedding day itself. And yet, in the records and literature left behind, there is surprisingly little complaint about this. Because the expectation was never that marriage would feel like love. The expectation was that love, if it existed, would grow slowly over years after the marriage had already begun. Ancient Rome gives you one of the clearest windows into how transactional marriage really was. Roman marriages among the upper classes were openly political. Families used daughters like diplomatic currency, marrying them into rival families to form alliances, end feuds, or secure military support. Julius Caesar himself was married off at 14 to consolidate his family's political position. His daughter Julia was later given in marriage to Pompey, not because anyone asked her, but because her father needed Pompey's support. She was a bargaining chip with a name. And yet, here's where it gets complicated. Roman law also gave women in certain types of marriages remarkable levels of independence compared to what came later in history. Under a form of marriage called sine manu, a Roman wife retained ownership of her own property and could even initiate divorce. This was not progress in the modern sense. It was a loophole, a legal structure designed to prevent the husband's family from absorbing the wife's family's wealth. The woman's relative freedom was a side effect of property law, not a recognition of her humanity. Ancient Egypt is often cited as an exception. And in some ways it was. Egyptian women had more legal rights than almost anywhere else in the ancient world. They could own property, run businesses, and appear in court without a male guardian. Egyptian marriage contracts, some of the oldest ever found, sometimes included clauses protecting the wife in the event of divorce and guaranteeing her a portion of shared property. Archaeologist and Egyptologist Gay Robbins has documented how Egyptian women, particularly in the New Kingdom period, had a level of economic agency that would not be seen again in Western civilization for nearly 2,000 years. But even in Egypt, marriage was still largely arranged by families, still largely driven by economic logic. The emotional dimension, the idea that two people should feel something before agreeing to spend their lives together, was present in Egyptian love poetry, some of the most beautiful ever written, but it was not the operating principle behind the institution itself. Now go back even further, before civilization, before agriculture, before property. What did pair bonding look like among early hunter-gatherer humans? This is where the picture gets genuinely strange. Anthropologist Christopher Ryan, in his research into pre-agricultural sexuality and pair bonding, argues that early human groups were far less rigidly monogamous than the institution of marriage implies. In small bands of 30 to 50 people who depended on each other for survival, the boundaries around partnership were fluid. Pair bonds existed. The evidence is clear in our biology, in our neurochemistry, in the way human infants require two caregivers to survive. But they were not necessarily permanent, exclusive, or legally enforced. They were practical. They lasted as long as they were useful. And they existed within a community of people who all shared responsibility for each other's children. The shift to agriculture did not just change what humans ate. It changed who humans were allowed to love. Because once you have land, you need to know whose children will inherit it. And the only way to be certain of that, in a world without genetic testing, is to control female sexuality completely. That is not a provocative claim. That is the historical and anthropological consensus. The tightening of marriage laws, the rise of virginity as a value, the punishment of adultery, the erasure of women's legal rights across much of the ancient world, all of it follows directly from the invention of heritable private property. Your ancestors did not design marriage to make people happy. They designed it to make property transfer predictable. And here is what makes this genuinely unsettling. Some of those design choices are still inside the institution you call marriage today. The white dress that signals purity. The father walking the bride down the aisle, a ritual that originated with the literal transfer of a daughter from her father's legal guardianship to her husband's. The ring on the left hand, a Roman tradition tied to the belief that a vein ran directly from that finger to the heart, which was itself a later romantic reinterpretation of what was originally a mark of legal ownership. Even the word wedding comes from the Old English word wed, which meant pledge or wager, a financial guarantee paid by the groom's family. The romantic version of marriage that you grew up believing in, the one based on personal choice, mutual love, and emotional compatibility, is, historically speaking, extraordinarily new. It emerged slowly in Western culture during the 18th and 19th centuries, accelerated by the Romantic movement, then by industrialization, which for the first time allowed individuals to earn their own income and choose their own partners without needing family approval. By the time your grandparents were born, love marriages were common. By the time your parents married, they were expected. By the time you think about marriage, they feel inevitable. They feel like the way it has always been. But they are, in historical terms, barely a heartbeat old. None of this means the love you feel is fake. None of this means the marriages around you are meaningless. If anything, the opposite is true. Because you are living in one of the only moments in the entire span of human history where two people can look at each other and decide, without family pressure, without economic necessity, without political calculation, that they want to build a life together simply because they want to. That choice, that specific, private, freely made choice, is new. It is rare. It is something your ancestors would not have recognized, and it is something worth understanding before you take it for granted. Tonight, if you think about the next wedding you will attend, or the last one you did, you will see something different in it. Not just a celebration, a revolution, a quiet, slow, centuries-long revolution in what humans decided they were allowed to want from each other. And the ceremony, the dress, the ring, the vows, all of it will look the same, but you will know what it took to get there. See you guys.